യോഗജാലകത്തിലൂടെ നമ്മുടെ ജീവിത പങ്കാളിയെ കണ്ടെത്താൻ
വേൾഡ് മാട്രിമോണി.
3.1 Ancient History. Management Through to the 1990s Learning Objectives. 1. Early motivation for development of principles. 2. What problems did these principles solve? 3. What were the limitations of these early views? Early management principles were born of necessity. The most influential of these early principles were set forth by Henry Fayol, a French mining engineer. In 1988, Fayol became director of a mining company. The company was in difficulty, but Fayol was able to turn it around and make the company profitable again. When he retired, Fayol wrote down what he'd done to save the company. He helped develop an administrative science and develop principles that the thought all organizations should follow if they were to run properly. Fayol's 14 Principles of Management. 1. Specialization, division of labor by specializing in a limited set of activities. Workers become more efficient and increase their output. 2. Authority, responsibility. Managers must have the authority to issue commands, but with that authority comes the responsibility to ensure that the work gets done. 3. Disciplined workers must obey orders if the business is to run smoothly, but good discipline is the result of effective leadership. Workers must understand the rules and management should use penalties judiciously if workers violate the rules. 4. Unity of command. An employee should receive orders only from one boss to avoid conflicting instructions. 5. Unity of directions. Each unit or group has only one boss and follow one plan so that work is coordinated. 6. Subordination of individual interests. The interests of one person should never take precedence over what is the best for the company as whole. 7. Remuneration. Workers must be fairly paid for their services. 8. Centralization. Centralization refers to decision making, specifically whether decisions are centralized made by management or decentralized made by employees. Fayol believed that whether a company should centralize or decentralize its decision making depended on the company's situation and the quality of its workers. 9. Line of authority. The line of authority moves from top management down to the lowest ranks. This hierarchy is necessary for unity of command, but communication can also occur laterally if the bosses are kept away of it. The line should not be overextended or have too many levels. 10. Order. Orderliness refers both to the environment and materials as well as to policies and rules. People and materials should be in the right place at the right time. 11. Equity. Fairness, equity, dignity, and respect should be pervade the organization. Bosses must treat employees well, with a combination of kindliness and justice. 12. Stability of nature. Organization do best when nature is high, turnover is low. People need time to learn their jobs and stability promotes loyalty. High employee turnover is inefficient. 13. Initiative. Allowing everyone in the organization the right to create plans and carry them out will make them more enthusiastic and will encourage them to work harder. 14. Spirit de corps. Harmony and team spirit across the organization builds morale and unity. Time and motion. Frederick Winslow Taylor and contemporary of Fayol formalized the principle of scientific management on his 1911 book, The Principles of Scientific Management. Taylor described how productivity could be greatly improved by applying the scientific method to management for this reason. The scientific approach is sometimes referred to as Taylorism. Taylor most famous for his time studies, in which he used a stopwatch to time how long it took a worker to perform a task, such as shoveling coal or moving heavy loads. Then he experimented with different ways to do the task to save time. Sometimes the improvement came from better tools. For example, Taylor advised the science of shoveling, in which he conducted time study to determine how much weight a worker could lift with a shovel without tiring. He determined that 21 pounds was the optimal weight. But since the employer expected each worker to bring his own shovel, and there were different materials to be shoveled on job, it was hard to ensure the 21-pound optimum, so Taylor provided workers with the optimal shovel for each density of materials like coal, dirt, snow, and soot. With these optimal shovels, workers became 3 or 4 times more productive and they were rewarded with pay increases. Frank Gilbert and his wife Lillian Moeller Gilbert, who outlived Frank by 48 years, were associates of Taylor and were likewise interested in standardization of work to improve productivity. They went one better in Taylor Times study devising motion studies by photographing the individual movements of each worker. They attach a light to workers' hands and photograph their motion at slow speed. The Gilberts then carefully analyze the motion and remove unnecessary ones. These motion studies were preceded by timing each task, so that the study were called time and applying time and motion studies to bricklaying. For example, the Gilberts devised a way for workers to lay bricks that eliminated waste motion and raised their productivity from 1,000 bricks per day to 2,700 bricks per day. Frank Gilbert applied the same technique to personal tasks like coming up with the best way to get dresses in the morning. Howe suggested the best way to button the waistcoat, for example, was from bottom up rather than top down. Why? Because then a man could straighten his tie in the same motion rather than leaving to raise his hand back up from the bottom of the waistcoat. Limitation of the early views file, Taylor and Gilbert's all addresses productivity improvement and how to run an organizational smoothly. But those views presume that managers were overseeing manual labor tasks. As work began to require less manual labor and more knowledge work, the principle they had developed became less effective. Worse, the principles of Taylorism tended to dehumanize worker. The writer Upton Sinclair, who raised awareness of deplorable worker conditions in the meatpacking industry in his 1906 book, The Jungle, was one of Taylor's vocal critics. Sinclair pointed out the relative small increase in pay, 61%, that workers received compared with their increased productivity, 362%. Frederick Taylor answered Sinclair's criticism, saying that workers should not get the full benefit because it was management that advised taught the workers to produce more, but Taylor's own word compare workers to beasts of burden. The worker is not an extraordinary man difficult find, he is merely a man, more or less the type of an ox, heavy both mentally and physically. When work was manual, it made sense for a manager to observe worker during a task and to advise the most efficient motion and told to do that task. As we move from a manufacturing society to serve based one, that kind of analysis had less relevance. Manager can see inside the head of the software engineer to advise the fastest way to write code. Effective software programming depends on knowledge work, not typing speed. Likewise, a services-based economy required interaction between employees and customers. Employees have to be able to improvise, and they had to be motivated and happy if they are to serve the customer in a friendly way. Therefore, new management theories were developed to address the world of management and overcome the shortcomings of the early views. Finally, early views of management were heavily oriented toward efficiency, the expense of attention to the manager as leader, that is, a manager basically direct resource to complete predetermined goals or project. For example, a manager may be engaged in hiring, training, scheduling employees to accomplish work in the most efficient and cost-effective manners possible. A manager is considered a failure if he or she is not able to complete the project or goals with efficiency or when the cost becomes too high. However, a leader within a company develops individuals to complete predetermined goals and projects. A leadership relationship with his or her employee by building communication, by evoking image of success, and by eliciting loyalty. Thus, later views of management evoke notion of leader and leadership in discussing the challenges and opportunity of modern managers.